Welcome to 100 Yards of Football this morning. We got our 2021 NFL Draft topic of the week. Will Mac Jones, the quarterback at the University of Alabama, be the next Tom Brady? If you like the video today, please come in and share it. I'm your host, Vincent Turner, and joining me today, he's a young man that's been doing this over the last 2 months, and he's brought a lot of funk, a lot of power, and a lot of swagger to 100 Yards of Football. He was an NFL scout under the two of the greatest coaches in the game, Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick. He has a book out, Whatever It Takes, one of the best sellers on Amazon. And he was a finalist in the 2017 GM job for the Cleveland Browns. He's coming from Key West, Florida this morning, the very talented Daniel Kelly. So if you want to share the video today and want to enjoy it, will Mac Jones be the next Tom Brady? Please sit back and enjoy the video this morning. How you doing, Mr. Kelly?
Hey, I'm doing very well, Mr. Turner. Thank you. It's nice to be on the show as always. How are you, sir?
I'm doing real well this morning. Real well. Ready to go. Good. So let's get into the topic this morning. Mac Jones, why would he be the next Tom Brady?
Well, I tell you what, Mac Jones is coming out of Alabama, 6'3", 214. At first glance, Mr. Turner, and to our listeners, when I saw his body type, the body type reminds me of a Tom Brady look to him. He's got those thin lower legs. He's got those big, broad shoulders. He sort of has a lot of that swag, kind of that Joe Namath, I'm going to dare to go there feeling to him when I watched him. And he's a guy that's a pure traditional pocket passer who has functional mobility. And when I say that's a term I've made up, functional mobility, he's not going to beat you on his feet, but he can move around when absolutely necessary. My grade on Mac Jones, Alabama, I'm giving him a grade of QB2. If our listeners are familiar with that terminology and being thrown around nationally, in other words, the second quarterback taken in the NFL draft this year, Justin Fields, I'm giving QB1, grade 2. Why? Because Fields has mobility, and when you're going to a team that had a losing record in 2020 and may have some work to do on the offensive line, mobility is important. So I'm saying that he is QB2 in this draft. Let me kind of go through this with you guys, what I'm seeing to start with. You're looking at a guy who's prolific. In Mac Jones, you're looking at somebody who gives a very decisive vibe to him when he's back in the pocket. He's somebody who is pro ready. You're going to hear me say that a lot on this show. He's a field general type. He's got a big old strong arm, a cannon for an arm, and he's got great touch and great accuracy. Let me unpack these different characteristics, if I could, Mr. Turner, on the show today. When I say prolific, I mean he's coming off the national champions. He's coming off a team that was coached by the greatest coach in the history of college football, Nick Saban. He knows how to win, and winning is the bottom line in the National Football League. He's very decisive. He's a smart looking person. He knows where he's going, obviously on film with the ball. He also goes through his reads. He's somebody who, when I say he's pro ready, he's king of the hill. I mean, this is somebody who has climbed the pinnacle of college football. Statistically, he led the nation in passing with 4,500 yards, and he's somebody who spreads the ball around. You're not looking at a one-trick pony who is dependent on one wide receiver. He's a field general type. He's in command. He's directing traffic pre-snap. He's pointing out where people need to go. He's confident, and he also has a big-time pocket presence. He stands tall in the pocket, and the team clearly and obviously responds to Mac Jones. He's a guy with that big old strong arm I alluded to. He throws a beautiful long pass. He can put mustard and heat on the ball over the middle. He's a guy that can also lay it in there with touch. That I pointed out, and he can finesse and lob the ball in there too, and throw what I call a very receiver-friendly ball, meaning he puts the ball only where the receivers can catch it. Often he's putting the ball out in front of the targets where they can just run through, like when Jalen Waddle just ran right through the pass into the end zone and took it to the house. You're looking at somebody who is very polished and pro-ready, like I mentioned, someone who is dramatically more polished and pro-ready than Trevor Lawrence Zach Wilson or Trey Lance. It's not even a comparison. The draft order should be Fields number 1 overall, Mac Jones number 2. And let's say this, my old team, there's a reason I'm wearing this hat today, Mr. Turner. There's a reason for it, because let's say my old team that I used to scout for, the New York Jets, takes him at number 2. Bill Parcells, who was my boss with the Jets for the first 2 seasons, had a saying in New York. He said, everybody wants the big job in New York until they get it. This is a different type of place. It takes a different type of person to succeed. A Joe Willie Namath, a Vinny Testaverde when he was there. Along these type of lines, this is who you're looking at. This is who he is. Jones has been groomed for the brightest of lights. Jones is what I call Saban ready. There's another new terminology for us. This is a guy that was groomed by the best coach, Nick Saban. And stop the presses. Stop the national narrative, Mr. Turner. Quit the autopilot Simon Says narrative. The film does not lie. When you look at these top-rated quarterbacks, I challenge any general manager in the National Football League that let's sit down in a room, let's put on the film. The film does not lie. Let's compare Mac Jones' film to Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance. Please have me in. Let's sit down and take a look at that. One of the things I love most about Big Mac, did you hear that, Mr. Turner? Big Mac? I'm going to get this guy's first endorsement deal with McDonald's. I can see that right now. One of the things I love most about him is I love that he cares about the game. One of the things that Bill Parcells taught me as a young scout was to learn the critical factors of scouting. And one of those critical factors of scouting is football important to him? Yes, it is. Jones is not another well-coached, mechanical, robotic, lackluster guy like Zach Wilson or Trey Lance, a guy who just goes through the motions of the pro day and can make, quote unquote, all the throws. That's not what you're looking at with Mac Jones. He cares, he shows, he has some spring in his step, and he shows some excitement, some visible emotion. Now let's talk about Mac Jones' game if we can for a few minutes. You're looking at a guy with good pocket mechanics, good pocket fundamentals. He's got a very good play action fake. It's a convincing play action fake. It's not like Trevor Lawrence's. He also can do a good pump fake. What these two things do is they hold and momentarily freeze defenses. They give him a route advantage and give him an advantage, his receivers an advantage on the routes. He's somebody who looks extremely poised in the pocket. He's focused downfield, maybe to a fault, because he does not seem to have eyes in the back of his head. He's somebody who takes some sacks, doesn't feel the backside rush because he's so focused downfield. But if he does see the rush, Mr. Turner, he's somebody who can slide around. He has enough functional mobility in the pocket to slide around and get out of trouble, buy a little extra time. He's tough. He's courageous. And my biggest concerns, it's not all moonlight canoes with this guy. It's not all positivity. I mean, like I said, he takes too many sacks for my liking. If I'm a general manager pulling the trigger in the war room, he also has a tendency to pat the ball. And what I mean by that is pre-delivery, you'll see him he'll pat the ball with his hand. That's a big no-no in the National Football League because that actually telegraphs the defensive backs where this guy is going to be going with the ball and giving the DBs a jump on the ball potentially. And is also has a tendency sometimes to lock in and stare down his receiver. But the thing I love also too about Big Mac is that he's showing visibly on film. I watched every single throw in 2020. He's actually showing the ability to overcome these things, and he's trying to clean these things up. He was not patting the ball as much as the season progressed, and he was also going through his progressions more as the season progressed. I could see his head turning and scanning. He was looking around the field before he delivered. Now, here's the big thing about Mac Jones. I want you to turn up the your show, turn up your volume on your phone or whatever kind of device you're watching this podcast. This guy has a cannon for an arm. It's every bit the arm of Trevor Lawrence. He can also throw the intermediate routes, the timing routes, the over the middle, medium range routes that Trevor Lawrence has not proven on film or shown that he can make with any consistency whatsoever. He has that to him. He has that middle game. Despite being able to put heat and mustard on the balls, I pointed out, Mr. Turner, he also can finesse the ball. He's not just throwing fastballs. He also can take some heat off it and put the ball out there in screens. And also his deep pass, he can put some air under it. I mean, I found myself saying a number of times, wow, when I watched the film. That's how I know over 40 years of watching the game, that's how I know we're looking at somebody special. He also, what I love about him is he spreads the ball around. As I mentioned, he's not dependent on any one receiver. Another thing too, I want to quickly circle back to is the beautiful long ball. What's going to happen when you see when you're drafted high in the draft, you're going to one of these teams that didn't finish that well in 2020, right? You know, so what happens is you need to be able to do some things, and he has a beautiful long ball, which is going to command respect from NFL defenses, which is going to open up almost artificially more of the running game for the team that he's going to, that's in need of that improvement. You know, at one point last season, after 4 weeks, CBS threw a statistic up on the screen I really liked. He had the most 30-yard plus touchdown passes in the country, and this is something I really want to point out as well. They followed up with a similar statistic when they said that in 2019, right, first pick overall, Joe Burrow, he through 4 weeks of last season, he had a completion ratio of 80.5. He had 1,520 yards and 17 touchdowns before he was drafted number 1 overall by the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, when you compare that to Jones' 2020 statistics through 4 weeks, he had a 78.3% completion percentage, 1,518 yards, almost identical to Burrow, and 12 touchdowns. That's why I think it's very logical to have this conversation this morning that we're having Mr. Turner, having him being the number 2 pick overall in the entire draft, because statistically he stacks up. And let's face the reality, for GMs who are drafting a franchise quarterback, it's really like marrying somebody. You know, it's for better or for worse till the job do you apart. You know, and mark my words. Now, I'm not going to come on this show. I mean, I say some pretty bold things, and everybody in the country knows that, and I see it all over social media. But I am not saying that Mac Jones is the next Tom Brady. I was born at night, as my daddy used to say, but not last night. I'm not saying he's the next Tom Brady. He's the next Mac Jones, and I think he's going to be pretty darn good. And really, you know, if the incorrect national narrative, the mindless national narrative stays true to form, and all the rest of these guys who everybody thinks is so good, the Zach Wilsons, the Trey Lances, and all these guys, if they go before Mac Jones, don't be surprised if Mac slides down the draft and goes to Saban's colleague and friend. That's right. We're talking about Bill Belichick with the New England Patriots, and fans will once again be kicking themselves for the next 10 years saying, how did we let this happen? This like they did for the last 2 decades with Tom Brady up in New England. I mean, I love this kid. I love everything about him. He excited me. Not many of them do. I enjoyed watching him. It was a pleasure watching him and writing him up. This is somebody who's going to be really good. Your thoughts, Mr. Turner?
Well, like I said, if you like the video today, please come and share it here on 100 Yards Football. What I like about Mac Jones, when you look at the Alabama program, they have 18 national championships now. He came into the season, really everybody thought Bryce Young, the 5-star recruit, was going to beat him out, based on the fact last year Mac Jones in 2019 really got the job because Mr. Tua got hurt. That's the first thing that I liked about the young man, the adversity. And then he was able to keep Bryce Young from not getting on the field. But when you overall look at the young man and the things I look at him, they're similar to Tom Brady. Tom Brady drafted in the 6th round in 2000 when Mac Brown chose to school, the University of Alabama. If you're not from the South, you don't know how powerful that program is. As I just mentioned, 18 national championships. Some of the greatest coaches that's coached on the level, Bear Bryant, Wallace Wade, Frank Thomas, and Nick Saban. Then look at the great players that played at that school. One of the best wide receivers who started wide receiver U back in the 30s, Don Hudson. Then we're talking about Dixie Howe. Then we're talking about Leroy Jordan, one of the best college linebackers ever. Then Kenny the Snake Stabler from Foley, Alabama. Pat Tramble, who won Bear Bryant's first national championship. A great linebacker from the state of Florida, Barry Krause, Steve Sloan, Derek Thomas, Cornelius Bennett. So he had to follow what I call that legacy, that greatness at Alabama. And then look, coming into his senior season, as I just mentioned, let's be for real. Nobody thought he was going to be able to beat Bryce Young out and he was going to be the quarterback for Alabama. But I'm always going to go to game film, why I say Mac Jones might be the next Tom Brady. Every time that's a big game, Tom Brady's won 7 Super Bowl rings, has played at a high level. Mac Jones this year, what made me believe that this guy could be great on the next level, I go to the University of Georgia game. 417 yards, 4 touchdowns against 3 defensive backs that's going to go in the first 2 rounds, and Tyson Campbell, Eric Stokes, and DJ January. Y'all can check the math on that and go look at any NFL draft board. Then number 2, big-time players playing big-time games. All I got to say, Florida, he put 400 and something on them, 4 touchdowns. Ohio State, 464, 4 touchdowns. So when you look at it, that's kind of like coming into the Tom Brady realm. Then what really, why I say this young man has got the Tom Brady, he really reminds me of Bart Starr, one of the best we don't ever talk about, who set the tone for champions at this level. Bart Starr, 17-round draft pick in the 1956 draft. Stayed in Green Bay for 4 years. Nobody ever thought he was going to get off the bench. But hey, boy, the greatest one who ever said done it came and became head coach in 1959. Oh, his name was who? My first name, Vincent Lombardi. And what did Bart Starr do over the next 8 years? 6 NFC titles, 2 Super Bowl titles, 2 MVPs, only 1 interception in postseason play. We're looking at Mac Jones and how ironic. They went to the University of Alabama. And then finally, 2 other points I want to bring on by Mac Jones this morning. Looking at him this season, there's some things that stuck out to him being a special football player. Unselfishness. Oh, Lord, have mercy. Discipline. Smart. Adaptable. And most of all, when you look at champions, and I'm not saying he's going to be a champion on the next level, but he got some of that champion greatness. Sammy Bob, Bobby Lane, Otto Graham. Help me out here. Johnny Unitas, Roger Staubach, Bob Greasy, oh Lord, Joe Montana, Joe Namath, and family, Bob Waterfield and Norm Van Bachlen. And then similar traits to the young man that's from out there in San Francisco who won his 7th Super Bowl ring with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, Tom Brady. By no means I'm not saying Mac Jones going to be the next Tom Brady, but he showed me that on a college level. And he stepped into the highest arena of college football. We're not talking about Colgate. We're not talking about Drexler. We're not talking about Kennesaw State. He did it at the University of Alabama. And I don't want to hear nobody else talking about he had the playmakers, he had the offensive line, because the quarterback position is the best, most important position on the floor. And I'm going to leave it with this. Mac Jones did his thing.
Wow. Hey, period. That's awesome, Mr. Turner. You know, I agree. When you go back and look at the full body of his work and you watch all the games, you're exactly right. He did this against the highest level of competition there is. He killed LSU. He went out there and played against great competition, the highest level of competition, and he thrived. And when you go back and look at the full body of his work, like I did in 2020, and watch every single throw and run, you'll see it's consistently good. When you watch him, you get a feeling that he is running the show in the pocket. He's somebody that has complete command of the offense. He's somebody that really looks the part, and that's what you want. I have this hat on, like I said, for a reason. I want to just address the Mr. Johnson for a moment, the owner of the New York Jets. if please, consider Mac Jones at number 2. Look at the film. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to Mr. Turner. Turn on the film in the war room and compare the two. Compare him to Trevor Lawrence, Zach Wilson, and Trey Lance, because at the end of the day, there's no comparison. When you look at Trey Lance, he's stumbling around out there and struggling against teams like James Madison in Central Arkansas. In these kinds of teams, he's not starring against. Mac Jones was starring. I think the biggest difference for me, Mr. Turner, and why I will immediately put the label in the next Tom Brady on Mac Jones, is because Tom Brady, the thing that made him great, in my scouting opinion, is the chip on the shoulder. You know what I mean? Everybody passed him by almost 6 times, 6 rounds, around and around and around and around and around we go. And basically, they kept passing him by. He wanted to prove to the world that they were wrong, and he did. Mac Jones is not going to have that same thing happen to him where he's going to slide into the 5th, 6th, 7th round. So he may or may not have that same chip on his shoulder, but he is pro ready. He's somebody who can handle, most importantly, the New York media. He's somebody who can handle the bright lights and the stage in New York. He's somebody that can step in and play at a very high level for the New York Jets. If I'm the general manager of the New York Jets, this is my guy at number 2.
Well, my final words this morning for 100 yards of football as we talk about Mac Jones. I'm going to go back and say Roll Tide. It's a band out of Alabama by the name of Leonard Skinner. And they had a song called Sweet Home Alabama. That's when I look at Mac Jones going into the NFL. Sweet Home Alabama. Mac Jones represented that school real well. I'm not saying he's going to be the next Tom Brady, but as I present my case along with you, Mr. Daniel Kelly, hey, I wouldn't bet against him.
Nope,
and finally,
me neither.
To the University of Alabama. I'm not a Roll Tide fan because y'all win all the time. And right now, y'all, in my opinion, it's the greatest football program in the history of college football. It's been proven on the field. And that young man who performed at a high level, Mac Jones, really bided his time, came by have some great players in Mr. Toole and Jalen Hurts, and he kept that train running. So my kudos as we ended the day here on 100 Yards Football. My final words to the University of Alabama. Roll Tide. Y'all be good this morning here on 100 Yards of Football.
Be blessed.